Well, I said that a fragmented worldview contributes to the fragmented state of individuals who hold that worldview. So, presumably, a whole worldview would contribute to the wholeness of the individuals who hold that worldview. So, I would like to describe a whole worldview. Whole means to include all of the parts. So I need to include in this worldview all the parts that I described in the fragmented worldview that we talked about a little bit ago. So here it is, a whole worldview. This uses some science that I described uh, in at some length in my book Life and Spirit in the Quantum Field, and I'm not going to go through all that description here. We'll just use the end result. So here we are in a whole world view. There is still an out there. There is still a me with an in here. And the the whole worldview includes obviously the material world. It's the one that we're all familiar with. It works like Newton said it does. So it's full of cars and trees and chairs and other people and all kinds of things. And there is still a me, and I am still observing the material world. I have an in here where I decide what I'm seeing. But now, in this view, I am part of the worldview. I am not separate from the worldview like I was in the fragmented worldview. And in a little bit, we will see just how connected we are. But for now, here's me, and I can observe the real world, the material world. But the world, our universe, has a material side and a transcendent side. And so we need something transcendent. And if we're starting from the science side, as as I am here, uh, we need something in science that is transcendent. And transcendence has been pretty scarce in science ever since Descartes gave the transcendent part to the church. But in 1926, Schrodinger wrote his famous equation for an electron, and that equation introduced a thing called the wave function. And the wave function for an electron is very interesting. It is non-material. For things that have little or no mass, the wave function is transcendent. It is distributed across space and time. It is holographic in that everything is everywhere, and it completely describes what can happen to the electron. It describes not just what actually happens to the electron that we might observe, it describes all of the possibilities. So all of these possibilities are churning along, changing and growing, and every once in a while, the wave function collapses into a specific material electron. The electron appears. But because everything that happens in the wave function, in order for the next thing to happen to this electron, it has to disappear back to the wave function. So that's how matter works. Matter is driven by this non-material transcendent wave function that carries all of the possibilities, that is holographic. Well, that's very interesting. Transcendence is a very useful property, but we're wanting to talk about people, and the wave function for an electron is not people. So we need next to connect people to wave functions. And there's a couple, there are 3 steps. Karl Pribram provided the first. He proposed that we think and feel in holograms. We don't think with neurons, we think in holograms. He calls it the holonomic brain theory. And these little holograms are holographic. They're waves, which is interesting because that's the same form that we talked about for the wave function of an electron. These wave functions are translated through the microtubes, which are things in all of our cells, especially the neurons. But the microtubes are quantum computers. They oscillate between a quantum distributed state and a collapsed material state. So it's my proposal that the microtubes take the holograms in our brain and translate them to and from the quantum field. So there it is. Our thoughts and feelings have a wave function. And just like the wave function for an electron, this is the source of our thoughts and feelings. This is the source for everything that we might possibly think or feel. And every once in a while, this wave function collapses through the microtubes into an instant of conscious awareness in our brain. But like the wave function for the electron, everything that happens over here in the transcendent side. So after it collapses, it disappears back to the wave function, informing the wave function of the state of the material being. So we think and feel in holograms. This also tells us something about the nature of these wave functions. It tells us that the wave function is intelligence. It is consciousness. It is my intelligence. Now, my thoughts and feelings have no mass, so my wave functions are distributed across space and time. They are transcendent. They are everywhere. And all of the information, because they're holographic, is everywhere. Now that's true for me, it's true for you, it's true for your in-laws, it's true for your cats and dogs, it's true for everything. All of my stuff, the thing that animates my life, is distributed everywhere. Now, there's a little more of us that's in the field. We have bodies. We have material bodies. Our bodies have form, and they have health, for better or for worse. But our health is carried by light. You thought it was chemistry, but it's actually light, called biophotons. These biophotons are conducted through the body in our old friends, the microtubes, so that our physiology, our state of health, has a wave function. Our health is happening in the field. Our state of health has no mass, so the wave function for our state of health is distributed across space and time. It's holographic, so that everything is everywhere. And every once in a while, out of all the possibilities going on in the wave function, it collapses into an instant of health. And then it returns to the wave function. Now, these are holographic systems. They are resonant systems. So it is possible to connect to anything by simply directing our attention and intention toward it. Well, there it is. That is what is incorrectly called the paranormal. It is not para, it is normal. It is the way things are. My thoughts and feelings, my health, and your health, and everybody's health and feelings are all distributed across space and time. We can connect with one another through our attention and intention. We can influence the health of other people by directing our attention to them. So the paranormal is not paranormal. It is simply the way things are. And it is a property of the fact that all of our stuff, our thoughts and feelings and our physiology are all transcendent wave functions. All right. The other part of our fragmented worldview was the part I called spiritual. And the spiritual side was transcendent, but it included things like soul and God and heaven. So, where does soul fit in? Let's begin with soul. This wave function that animates me when I have a material body is distributed across space and time. My body is quite local and temporal. It has a beginning and an end. And after my body is gone, my stuff is still there, still living, breathing in the field. Well, what's that? People have always called that soul. So, my wave function is my soul. All right, God. God comes very nicely from a rule in quantum mechanics. And this rule is very different from the corresponding rules in regular physics. The rule is that when two things interact, the wave functions for those two things are a single wave function. Anything or things that interact are all included in the same wave function. Well, everything interacted back in the Big Bang. It's been entangled ever since. So really, there is only one wave function in the universe. We understand that the content of this wave function is intelligence, and that it is the source of all of the material world. Everything that happens moment to moment is an expression of this single intelligence. So what is the single intelligence that animates the world? Well, people have always called that God. So there it is. God is the collected wave function of the universe. It houses everything. You and me and your cats and dogs and your in-laws, everything is part of this cosmic wave function. And everything is a direct expression from moment to moment of that cosmic intelligence. Now, one of the properties of vibrating systems, and holograms in particular, is that they are capable of maintaining a vast number of individual vibration modes. So the pattern that is me and the pattern that is you are each maintained individually. The identity is kept even though we are all part of an integral, indivisible part of the whole. The spiritual side involves the notion of heaven. Heaven is where souls and God live. Well, in this model, heaven is not a place. It is everywhere, but it is not separate from God and soul. It is simply God and soul. Now, we can perceive things on the transcendent side, and we do all the time. This is how intuitives work. This is how dreams work. This is how inspiration and ideas work. This is all information that comes from the intelligent field that we can perceive. And usually, not always, but usually, when we perceive a presence, which we can do, from the field, it feels good. This connection to things in the field that we are aware of feels good. And indeed, we have always valued connection. We don't usually say it that way. The things that we have always valued are love and compassion. This is ancient and widespread spiritual teaching. We are healthier when we are connected. But love and compassion are kinds of connection. And the field, because it is a big hologram, is nothing if not connection. It is not a virtue in the field. It's not that there's some choice to be otherwise. It is the only way to be. Everything is connected. But we value that connection, in part because it's hard for a lot of people to perceive for reasons that we'll see in a minute. But we value that connection. We call it love. So we can say that this wave function God is love. It is connection. And we can feel that connection. So there is a description of a whole out there that feels pretty good. It is full of connection and love, and we are part of it. We are an integral part of all that is. And we can be aware of that, and it feels pretty good. So if that's what's out there, then we should be feeling pretty good if we are perceiving what's out there. We ought to be floating around like happy Buddhas, right? Well, I think that's true. And as I said at the beginning, there are a few people who are, but there are lots of people who are not. How can that be? How can we live in this world that is so connected? How can we feel so afraid and isolated? And for that, we need to look at the in here a little more. So let's do that next.